What a typical day looks like varies greatly from company to company, even from week to week in the same project. Here I will share with you what a typical day has looked like for me in different work environments, and I'll share some context with you as well. Now, this isn't a guarantee that when you start working as a software tester, the work experience will be exactly as I describe it, but it should give you an idea as to what to expect. Let's start off with a large waterfall project. Here's some context. We're integrating multiple government systems, and there were well over 100 people in the project. To be honest, I don't know exactly how many people, but there were even more than 200 people. I sat with a team of other testers. Now, we basically had the floor or area in the building to ourselves, so I wasn't exactly able to roll my chair up to other developers. And we were working towards one big release. There was a countdown to a very important date, and that's what we were working towards. Now, we wrote test cases based on the requirement specification that was fairly fixed, and any changes made to requirements had to go through a change review process that involved multiple stakeholders. As I said earlier, we were sitting in a separate area from developers, so there was no direct access to the developers. No one in my team that I knew of had any sort of relationship with anyone who was actually building the system. The designs were not available, so in terms of what was being built, we never actually got to see some sort of visual representation of what it was going to look like. It would take more than 6 months for builds to become ready for testing. Now, what would I be doing during a typical day? Well, it would depend on what part of the project or where we were in the project. So to start off with, this is what I was doing while I was waiting for a build to test. We had no regular daily team meetings, so we had weekly meetings as a test team. There was quite a bit of reading the documentation and getting familiar with the requirements. Now, once I felt I understood the requirements, then I'd start writing test cases in the test case management tool. Now, to be honest, I do remember specifically writing the test cases in Excel under a very specific format. So they had certain headings that we had to use. And then we would import these test cases into the test case management tool. We'd get reviews on the test cases that we had written in the test case management tool from others in the test team, including the test lead. Now, once the test cases were written, we'd sit around rereading documentation until the build was ready to test. Now, this is what life looked like when our test team had received a build to test. We had regular daily team meetings as a test team. We'd execute the test cases which we wrote earlier. We'd write bugs in the bug tracking tool, and the bug severity was determined by the testers, but the bug priority was determined by a regular defect triage, which only the test managers were part of. Now, on the day of a release, wasn't actually that eventful for us. You see, since our test team was so removed from the actual release process, there weren't any special tasks we had to do. Now, what I liked about this environment, I did enjoy working with and sitting beside other testers. It meant it was very convenient to ask for feedback from other testers and to bounce ideas off each other. What I didn't like about this environment, I didn't like the fact that we found issues so late in the process and realizing it'd take a long time for me to be able to retest the issues, as it had to go through 2 other testing phases first. You see, I was in the user acceptance testing team, but the other 2 testing phases or test teams that actually exist on this project were system test and system integration test. Let's get into the second work environment, a co-located Scrum team working with multiple releases each day. Here's some context. We worked on various features in a specific product area, and we were 8 people in a cross-functional Scrum team. Developers could only have branches open for a maximum of a day, and if branches were open for longer than this, they were considered too big and were expected to be broken down into multiple branches. So you see, we wanted to keep changes small. Feature flagging and canary testing were utilized often. There were multiple releases to production each day. Business analysts and product owners would write the user stories based on feedback from customers and the customer support team. Now, each and every day, as we did multiple releases a day, we would have daily 15-minute stand-ups in the morning. And aside from the standard, what did we do yesterday, what did we do today, and sharing what blockers we had, we would also discuss what was going out to prod that day, or production. I would talk to the senior back-end developer and senior front-end developer in the team to know what's ready for test and what's coming up in the next few days. I would also pair with the developers as they would show me what's about to go out to prod either later that day or later that week. I would work on my mind maps for testing upcoming features, and I'd share this with the developers to get their thoughts. I would pair with other testers from other Scrum teams when I got builds ready for test to talk them through what I tested, and so I could get their feedback to see what did I do well and maybe some things that I missed. Here's what I liked about this work environment. I liked the fast pace. I learned so much in this team because we were always very busy. And what I didn't like about this environment, at times it was hard to pair with other testers when everyone happened to be very busy in their teams. Now, ideally, I did want to maybe have gotten more feedback from the other testers regarding my test approach and what I test and such, but it did not always happen, but it often did, to be honest. Let's move on to the work environment where we were co-located Scrum team working with 1 to 2 releases each month. So it's somewhere in between the 2 examples I've already given. Now the context. We worked on various features in a specific product area. We were 12 to 14 people in a cross-functional Scrum team. Feature branches would often be open for 1 to 2 months, and we had 1 to 2 releases a month. Now, my work was split between manual or hands-on testing and writing test automation code. It was roughly a 60-40 time split overall between manual testing and writing test automation, but this would vary depending on how far we were from a release. So while it was a 60-40 time split overall, I would say some days I would only be updating a regression test or test automation, and then other days it'd be only testing a new release, for example. Now, 1 to 2 weeks before a release, we would have daily 15-minute stand-ups in the morning, which would cover the standard, what did we do yesterday, what will we do today, and any blockers. I'd reach out to developers directly in the team to know what's ready for test and what's coming up in the next few days. I'd focus on testing features that are coming up in the next 1 to 2 weeks, or specifically preparing for those features. And I'd write test automation code for any features that are in the main branch. Now, the day before a release. The standard daily 15-minute stand-up, I would double check with everyone if we have what we need and the timing of when we plan to push to production. I'd go back over my testing notes and what's covered in the release to make sure there's nothing missing. The day of a release. This was generally calmer than the day before a release, as we should be ready and we don't try to squeeze in last-minute changes. We'd have the daily 15-minute stand-up, and this would also include what was going out to prod that day. We'd do some sort of sanity testing to make sure the release went well. We'd focus on preparing tests for upcoming features that are not part of that day's release. And then hopefully we'd celebrate. Now here's what I liked about this work environment. The split between manual testing and test automation, and the variety of what each work week offered really appealed to me. What I didn't like about this work environment, the team was too big for my liking. It meant sometimes things fell between the cracks because of all the communication channels.